Hello and welcome to the Paul Green Comedy PaulCast for December 2nd, 2024. This is episode 340. Oh my gosh. Every time I get another 10 episodes, it's just an accomplishment. I am down to the final 25 episodes of my 365 episode goal of the Paul Green Comedy PaulCast. This is stand-up comedian, actor, and improviser and dreamer, Paul Green, sharing my journey as I pursue my dreams in the hopes that perhaps you will pursue yours as well. And first of all, a very, very happy birthday to my mother and devoted listener who has listened to every episode of the Paul Green Comedy PaulCast and has commented on every single episode. So thank you, Mom, for being my biggest fan. It's nice to know I have at least one. So, I am coming to you from Pine Top, Arizona, which is a quick drive from Sedona, where I was last night. And tonight I had a performance at the Honda Resort and Casino in Pine Top. This is actually the third time that I've done comedy at the Honda Casino. And every time it just gets better. And it was just me and Josh Novi. We're the only two people in the show. And that's just real fun times because me and Josh, we're just starting to get a pretty good groove in terms of performing together, understanding each other's energy or vibes. And it was pretty fun because we did a little two-person show at the very end like we did in Sedona. So I did about a 30-minute set. Josh did about 45 minutes. And then we actually brought somebody from the audience up on stage and talked to them. It was a lady named Sarah who was almost 70 years old, and she was a lot of fun. And we had a good chat with her, learned a little bit about her life. And then the Honda Casino actually has a grand piano just off to the side of the stage. And so I jumped down to the piano, and then we improvised a song about Sarah. And Josh and I have been doing this two-person show called the Midlife Crisis Comedy Show for about 5-6 months now. And the entire show is just that, is just us interviewing people from the audience and singing songs about them. But it was really fun to do it in this context because it was sort of a special little treat. We didn't do that for the whole show. We just did stand-up, and then just the very last thing we did was just sing one song. And both times that we did this, we did it in Sedona and we did it tonight. It's just fun seeing their family in the audience will pull out their cell phones and start recording it. And I don't know, there's just something very special about that, to know that we're providing this unique experience for, in this case, a mother. She had, Sarah had her daughter and son-in-law were there with her to watch the comedy show. And how many times in their lifetime will their mother get a chance to talk about her life in front of a group of people and then have a song made up about her life? It's just something that I think is pretty special and really cool. And, we're seeing that a lot when we do the Midlife Crisis Comedy Show, of whoever came to the show with them, when they see somebody in their party get on stage, the cell phones come out and everybody wants to record this experience. And so it just makes it a little bit more special, makes it a little bit more unique. So other than that, things are just going really well. And I am about to embark on a crazy couple of weeks. A lot of travel, a lot of shows, just to give you the rundown of the next 2 weeks. So I will be driving back from Pine Top to Phoenix tomorrow, which is about a 3-hour drive. And then Thursday, I have the Midlife Crisis comedy show at JP's Comedy Club in Gilbert. Friday, me and Josh have a Midlife Crisis comedy corporate show up in Northern Scottsdale. And then on Sunday, the 8th, I'm going to dress up like Batman for a kids' party. Then I need to drive to Simi Valley, which is about an hour north of Los Angeles, to do a stand-up comedy show, which I will be headlining. And then I need to drive back from LA and then hop in the car with Josh Novy. And then we're going to drive 8 hours up to Salt Lake City to do a corporate gig on Wednesday, the 11th. And then we need to drive back because I need to be back in town by Thursday, the 12th, back in Phoenix to do a corporate stand-up comedy gig at like 3 p.m., I think, at a Mexican restaurant. And then that night, I'm featuring at JP's Comedy Club. So that'll be Thursday night, the 12th. And then Friday and Saturday, I will be headlining 4 shows at JP's Comedy Club. That is what I've got going on the next 2 weeks. And it is crazy time. And at the same time, I just got to stand back and go, this actually is the dream. I'm living it right now. My dream is and always was to get to a point to where I was touring and performing and just having these opportunities to share my comedy with many different audiences and venues, and it's all happening. It's all happening. And yes, I definitely have grander goals and grander ambitions, but as I've talked about many times on the podcast, I always make sure to remember that happiness and fulfillment is to be found each day in the journey and not always looking for some nebulous destination or even a defined definition or destination to decide that once I get to that point, well, then I will be happy, because as I've learned more and more, it's all destination. It's all journey. And I'm doing it right now. I mean, I had such a great time tonight. Was this the ideal venue? Not at all. Was there tons of people? No, there was maybe 20 people there at the casino show tonight in Pine Top. And, the seating was kind of weird. There was a big dance floor. So like the nearest table and chairs are like 15 feet away from the stage. And they don't really have an usher or a host to seat people. So people just sort of filter in. And of course, if people are left to their own devices, where do they sit? They sit in the very back. So like the furthest seats away from the stage is almost where everybody sat. And then there was like a couple of couples kind of off to the side, and then like another table, like 15 feet away, kind of off to the left, so it's all spread out. And yet I couldn't have been happier to just stand on stage and connect with that audience. It's like, that's the audience that came to see me. And that's the audience that I get an opportunity to make laugh and to share my comedy. And I'm really starting to settle into my material. I feel like it's becoming more and more organic as opposed to, maybe more formulaic. I think a lot of times when a stand-up comedy bit is new, or even just a comic is newer, the you can kind of see the writing in when you're listening to a newer stand-up comic, right? You can see where the wheels are turning. It feels more like a presentation and less like a conversation. And what makes stand-up comedy such a unique art form is that it actually, when it's done, I feel the way that it should be done is it does just feel like a conversation. It just feels like the comedian's just up there talking to you. But it takes a long time to get to that point. And a lot of times, like I said, it's almost like you can see the writing as the comic is talking. You can tell that they're just reciting their script, reciting their jokes to you. And, when I listen to tapes of me or watch, recordings of me doing stand-up, it's like, oh, I can totally see that I'm doing that. And one of the things that I've really been working on is trying to smooth those edges a little bit and to just be okay talking to the audience, just conversationally, still have the jokes, still have the punchlines, still have the words be tight, but to just to remove the presentation, to make it less presentational and more conversational. And I don't know. I'm starting to feel that it's getting there and just feels more organic. And even so much so that tonight, at the request of my girlfriend, I actually tried some older material. Those of you who follow the podcast may know this, but back in April, I had about a 20-minute routine 30-minute routine that I was doing fairly regularly. And it was going pretty well, but I decided to throw out all of that material and start over. And so that newer material is what I've really been performing for about the last 5 or 6 months. And tonight, I decided for the first time in 6 months to actually try to reincorporate some of that older material back into my set and see if I can also make that material feel more organic and more conversational than how it was being presented 6 months ago. And for the most part, it worked. I changed a couple things around with the material to make it more consistent with my persona, which I'm really trying to focus on. And just trying to get my stand up to the next level, everybody. And I don't know. It's hard to see progress each day, but when I look back a year ago I had nothing. So, well, that's not true. Maybe about a year and a half ago I had nothing. So it's been a lot of work, a lot of failure, a lot of challenging myself to constantly improve, to not be super hard and critical of myself, but being willing to critique and to be open to critique and to listen to the people around me who are listening to my stand-up and who I know have my best intentions and like know what they're talking about, like I've received feedback from really talented, successful comedians, comics who are out there working in the trenches, club owners and bookers and, the club owner that you perform at all the time sits you down and says, hey, this might be something to look at. It's usually a good idea to look at it, Now, yes, granted, there are people out there who will criticize or critique who don't have your best interest in mind and actually don't know what they're talking about. And, sometimes you have to use a little discernment to determine who is actually telling you valuable feedback and who isn't. But I've been very fortunate that there are people in my life who are competent and compassionate and knowledgeable and actually give a crap enough to be like, hey, you might try not yelling as much. Hey, you might try being a little bit more honest. Hey, you might try not being so silly. Hey, you might try not being so jokey, like all of these types of all this feedback that I've received that when I took it into consideration and was willing to try it out actually made my act better. So I just feel like I'm starting to reap some of the rewards on stage. And it just, I don't know, it just makes it fun. It's more fun for me. It's more fun for the audience. It's more connected with the audience. I'm not nervous. I just feel very grounded and comfortable. Just, well, this is what I'm going to talk about. And I have all the material worked out more or less, and now all I got to do is just deliver it in the most organic and authentic way that I can. And that's really starting to shine through, which, oh man, it's really nice because I have been working at this for a lot of years, and it did not come easy to me. So with that, let's talk a little bit about the self-help book that I am listening to again. This is my second go around with the one and only Brené Brown and her book, The Power of Vulnerability. And oh my gosh, I've already listened to the introduction multiple times. Just the introduction has so much to unpack. And in the introduction, she talks about the wholehearted, those who live their life wholeheartedly. Wholehearted living is what she calls it. And she gives 10, attributes of those who live wholeheartedly. And so before I even get to the chapters, I want to take a podcast episode and talk about each one of these. So, yesterday I talked about the first one, which is being authentic, cultivating authenticity and letting go of people's thoughts of you or what people think of you, which, I mean, that alone is, my gosh, the challenge behind that statement. Today, number 2 is to cultivate self-compassion and let go of perfectionism. Now, wasn't that easy? That pretty much all I've been talking about for the last 5 minutes is trying to perfect my act. Which, by the way, perfectionism to me is not the same thing at all as improvement and growth, because I feel we should always be striving for improvement and growth. When I think of perfectionism and the negative elements of perfectionism, it's when our need to be perfect circumvents or hinders our willingness to try and fail. And that, to me, is where I think perfectionism can really be limiting. I don't think that perfectionism is necessarily my vice, and trust me, I have many. But where I really struggled with perfectionism is how many times I have stopped myself from trying something or taking advantage of opportunities because I was too afraid to fail, or I didn't want to fail, or well, I'll give you a real life example. I've been talking about my evolution as a stand-up. When I first started doing stand-up, I actually hated doing it. I never wanted to be a stand-up comedian. I wanted to be a comedic improv actor. I wanted to be like Ryan Stiles and Colin Mockery. And I was just hoping that on the laurels of my improv capability alone, that would be sufficient enough to launch me into fame and stardom. And, you know, it that just never really happened. And I started doing stand-up really as just more of a, I don't know. I never really thought that stand-up would be such a main focus in my life. I really didn't. It like I just kind of viewed it as like, oh well, I'm an actor and I'm a comedic actor and an improviser, but yeah, I'll do stand-up here or there. And when I started doing stand-up, I hated writing. I almost never wrote. I didn't have any sort of daily practice of writing. I hated doing open mics. Um, and I was in a stand-up comedy class and we would do like one show a month. So when I started doing stand-up, I was doing one 5-minute set a month, which, by the way, to be really good at stand-up, the people who are really good at it, they write every single day and they usually perform every single day. When I first moved to LA, there were comics who were doing 3 or 4 open mics every night, all nights, just non-stop comedy. They would write all day, and then they would do 3 open mics at night, and then they would wake up the next day, they would write some more and do 3 open mics. I wasn't even close to approaching that level of volume and that level of commitment. Um, for many reasons, not the least of which was I just didn't have the courage to just keep standing in front of people at an open mic and sucking. Like I didn't want to fail. And I knew I wasn't that good at it. And one of the weird things about stand-up comedy is you actually have to you learn in front of an audience. I don't know any other art form that your progression is put in front of an audience more so than stand-up comedy. It's like if you're a musician, you practice in your bedroom for hours and hours and weeks and months and months and months. Or, if you're, like playing an instrument in band, right? You go to band practice and you're just practicing in the band. And then after like 3 months of practicing, you go put on like one concert. If you're a singer, if you're in a Broadway musical, nobody sees the musical until it has been written, rehearsed, perfected for months and months and months before anybody would ever see that musical. If you are a painter, you paint for months and years and years and years and years before you ever put a painting like at a gallery or try to sell it. But stand-up, it's like, oh, you're a brand new stand-up comedy. Okay, write some jokes, and then tonight, go try to tell the jokes you just wrote in front of an audience. Yeah, maybe practice in front of a mirror. It's really remarkable how that is the process for stand-up comedy when that doesn't seem to be the process for any other performing art or any art whatsoever. That you actually hone the craft live in front of an audience every single night. I just wasn't built that way. And writing was such a challenge for me. And I remember just moving to LA and I kept feeling drawn or inspired to do stand-up. I'm like, I don't want to do stand-up. I want to do acting. Why am I even trying to do stand-up? There's so many other stand-ups who are so much better than me, so much more funny than me, more talented than me, harder working than me, better looking, younger. And it was so hard for me. It was so hard. I hated going to open mics in LA. Just sitting there in these bars or these old theaters or like the upstairs room of a club or um i- i- just I mean I did an open mic in an alley. I did an open mic in a backyard. I did an open mic in a moving truck. There was a guy who had a mobile open mic. He literally had a moving truck, like a U-Haul, a converted U-Haul, that he just put a microphone, a speaker, and like 10 chairs, and you walked into the back of the truck and you signed up and you did an open mic. And every time I would be sitting at those open mics, just surrounded, it's almost always just other comics. It's very rarely that there's ever like a regular audience member at these open mics. And so like, not only am I being judged, I'm going to be judged by my peers. And then I got to stand in front of these LA people who I didn't resonate with. You know, I don't know. It was just, it was so hard and I never wanted to do it. And it was such a challenge. And so much of it, going back to this idea of perfectionism, is it was so hard on my ego to, and my empathy. It was like my ego for myself and then my empathy for the audience. I just felt bad for everybody that had to listen to me do comedy when I wasn't good at it. Like, it just didn't seem fair. Um, but that's the process. So Brene Brown says, to live wholeheartedly, first of all, give yourself some self-compassion. And let me tell you, I have had to work so hard to let go of so many guilt narratives, so much shame narrative, so much disappointment in myself to truly just love and accept myself for who I am and forgive myself for every screw up I've ever done in my entire life, which is plenty. And at the same time, being willing to let go of this perfectionism and be okay. Like, just be okay being okay. Be okay not being the funniest guy in the open mic. Be okay not being the funniest guy in the lineup. Be okay trying out a new joke and not have it go well. Be okay having a joke that was working well and isn't now. And really trying to shift my entire psyche from every time I stand on stage, I've got to be so funny and I've got to slay and I've got to crush, or I am not worthy or I'm wasting everybody's time, and shifting that from it's absolutely okay to try my best, give my best shot. And if it doesn't go well, I'm going to be okay. If I try a new bit and it doesn't work, I'm going to be okay. And what's more important is that I keep getting up and I keep performing and I keep honing the craft. And I hone that craft from a place of self-compassion and love and acceptance for myself and for my art and for my craft, and the understanding that, not going to be the perfect comic on any given lineup. I may not even be the funniest guy at the show. Matter of fact, I rarely am. In Las Vegas, I got down to the top 6 but I wasn't the first, and I wasn't the second, and I wasn't the third. And that's okay. All I'm going to do is continue to hone the craft from a place of love and a place of compassion. And because that's fulfilling, because it's exciting for me now to see, oh, can I get funnier? Oh, can I make this bit work better? Can I connect more with an audience if I approach them differently? If I change up my persona a bit? If I'm a little more authentic? If I'm a little more true to myself? If I'm a little less performy? If I don't yell as much, like all of these things that I've been working on, they're not coming from a place of, oh no, I have to be perfect before I ever get on stage. They're coming from a place of, I'm so grateful to be on this journey. And I'm so grateful anytime somebody comes out to see me do comedy that I want to connect with them as best as I can. And I want to provide as much humor and vulnerability and connection as I can. But not from a place of lack and not from a place of need and not from a place of unworthiness or not from a place of I need to prove that I'm worthy of loving, but just from a place of self-compassion, a place of authenticity, a place of vulnerability, and just a place of loving that I have been put in a position at this point in my life to even have an opportunity to do this. Because that really is the dream. All right, everybody. That's enough pontificating for tonight. This has been the Paul Green Comedy PaulCast for December 2nd, 2024, episode 340. I love you all so much, and I will talk to you tomorrow.